Hey guys, what's up? I've got quite a few spear invasion videos today. This video is likely going to clock in around 30 minutes. I decided to start with something a bit lighthearted. I'm not sure what was up with these guys if they misplaced their Estus flasks, but both of them were in pretty big trouble when I arrived. And maybe they were just trying to finish off that first NPC before I got there. I'm not really sure, but I thought that was amusing. But like I said, I've got a lot of clips today. Almost all of these will be 3v1s or 4v1s. There may be a couple of 2v1s scattered in here, but I'm really trying to distill these to the most interesting ones. And I think I mentioned in a previous video, but for every one of these that I show you, there's at least 5 or 6 that end up on the cutting room floor, just because they're not that interesting. And lately I've had a lot of 1v1s. Yeah, I've had some good ones, and in fact, there was a guy from Japan I played the other day, and he and I had an awesome fight. It went on for probably about 9 minutes, and he ended up beating me. He's one of the best players I've ever played against, but it was so long, I'm just afraid that it would be too boring to watch, so I may make it a standalone video at some point. We'll have to see, but it was a very, very good fight. I've been thinking a lot lately about how to kind of optimize this build that I'm using and maybe change it up a bit. Part of the impetus for that was I found a video of some guy using a faith build, and I noticed he was using heal, not medium heal or great heal, but just regular heal, and it was healing tons of HP for him. And when I've used it, I don't get very much healing out of it all. And it was obviously, probably most people already know, it's because it scales with faith. And I did not realize that the amount of healing actually is a function of the amount of faith you have, which makes perfect sense. And frankly, I should have already been aware of that. And this one I included just because this guy was kind of a clown, like these really blatant parry attempts. Had no idea what was coming there. But anyway, he was getting a lot of healing out of his chime, and so I actually hopped on the Soul Level 90 Discord, and I was talking to a couple of the people there, had some interesting discussions with them. I'm thinking about making some changes to my build. Right now, I only have 15 Faith and 10 Attunement, just the bare bones to put on medium heal. But I've also been experimenting. The problem with medium heal is it can sometimes be tough to get off. If you're getting a lot of pressure from your opponents, you may not really have space to get it off. So I tried playing around. I actually, on some of these clips, you'll see I have Blessed Weapon instead of medium heal. My thinking being that it casts faster, it gives me a buff, and it gives me some regen. Now in practice, the regen isn't very good. And the regen is probably only worth, I don't know, maybe 80 HP for each cast. So I'm probably going to go back to medium heal. And what I may also want to do is try to equip some sort of passive healing spell, because you can cast those pretty quickly. The chime I have has the weapon art, and I don't remember what it's called, but when you cast it, it gives you passive regen. And it's actually pretty decent, but it requires that you keep the chime equipped. Even if you two-hand your weapon and you kind of keep it in that active slot, like you might a Blessed Cestus, it won't do anything, which is kind of frustrating. So I'm thinking about making changes to the build. I'm thinking about going almost all faith on this guy's Soul Level 92, but I'm just really not sure what that's going to mean for me from a weapons perspective. I'm not sure what I'm really going to want to use that's going to scale well with faith. And I have to make a decision about whether I infuse it with lightning or blessed. I could also use some sort of buff like Dark Moon Blade or Lightning Blade, but that uses up a valuable weapon slot, and every weapon, or a miracle slot, and every miracle I add is going to require me to have additional attunement. So there's just a lot there for me to think about. I haven't made any changes yet, but I've set up a few Mujins. Hope to hell that's how you pronounce that. And I know a couple of the folks on the Discord were setting some up as well, so we'll have to see where that goes. I had an interesting discussion on Reddit the other day about general strategies with respect to Spear, the church invasions, and it was kind of a question of, do you go for an Estus reduction strategy. In other words, just kind of generally attack the field and work through their Estus to the point where they can't heal any longer and kill them that way. And I think the general consensus is that strategy is not very efficient. It's not a very practical strategy. But sometimes that's all you've got. The alternative strategy, which I employ frequently, is to go really hard after one character in particular. And I'll do this if I manage to get somebody low at health and I can chase after them. That's one of the reasons actually that I've settled on this Murakomo, is because it does well in crowds. It has a decent amount of poise, although it's a little slow to start. But it's really, really, really great when you're chasing after somebody. It's fantastic. And there I use the weapon art, and I don't use that very often. You'll see I think I use it here again in a moment. It just consumes so much stamina. And there's usually too much going on in this game for me to pay attention to my stamina too closely. I'm not in the habit of watching. And there you can see I went way negative. It's just so dangerous losing stamina like that. So I just generally don't like to use that weapon art. But the amount of stamina you get in these invasions is a function of how many players are in here. So you get varying amounts of stamina, and I'm just not a good enough player to really keep track of that. So my strategy has kind of evolved over time, where I don't do too many attacks in a row. But I think if I were better at managing my stamina, it would really pay a lot here in the Spear of the Church invasions. Also, I used to not use the Divine Spear item. That was I just didn't see the point. It was really telegraphed. It was easy to avoid. And there was a discussion on Reddit where we were kind of debating the merits of it, and I came out kind of against it, and I got a lot of really good feedback. One of the points that somebody made was it's a really great way. Oh, and that was so lucky right there. I was able to pick up that post. But one of the observations that was made was, hey, you can use it for buffs, you can use it to heal. So if you're in a tight spot and you want to be able to get a heal off, you just throw that out there, and then you hide in actually among the spears, and you can do whatever you need. And that's a really good point. It is good for that. But despite all of its flaws, it being telegraphed, it's amazing how many people will just blindly run into it, or they'll panic roll away from you into it, and then when they bounce up against it, they'll keep rolling at it. They'll start panicking. I think I get a kill later on from somebody doing exactly that. The other thing that I find super useful to do with the Divine Spear is right when the Guardian spawns in, the second one, a lot of people like to try to set him up for a backstab. So the second you see him spawning in, if you're in a good enough position, you can cast that so that the spears go directly over the Guardian and prevent them from doing that. Or after they get a backstab, you can cast it off, and that way when your opponent comes out of the backstab animation, they're stuck right in the middle of those spears, and they'll take a hefty amount of damage. So that's another strategy that I've employed here. There seems to be a general kind of lack of interest in these Spear of the Church invasions, and I'm not sure I understand it. I think, from an invading perspective, I think this is the most balanced invasion type that I've ever participated in across all the games, the various covenants. I mean, if you think about like the Aldrich Faithful or the Watchdogs, they're a bit better balanced in a sense, because you've got so many different people that can help you out. You can have multiple invaders at the same time, and you can't hit each other. So there's a lot of different variations in invasions, but I really feel like these are the best balanced. These are the most fun. These are the most rewarding for invaders. Getting ganked in a normal invasion can be really frustrating and challenging, and quite honestly, it can be as much a matter of luck as it is skill, whether you're successful or not. I mean, obviously, more skillful people will be successful more often, but there is still a substantial amount of luck involved. With all the poise buffs you get here and the defense buffs, I do feel like it's a lot more skill related. And there I went for a setup parry, but unfortunately those orbs hit him, and I think ruined my setup parry. The one bad thing about this Murakumo is that it's slow. And typically it doesn't matter in these invasions, but every now and then I'll come across a Weisenheimer, a really good player, somebody that's either going to roll or they're going to use a shield. Shields are deadly against this weapon. Somebody that can block, especially if it's a shield that can parry, you got to be super, super careful against something like that. Now, if you think you've got a read and you think somebody's going to do a setup parry, you could do the weapon art, which is really good punishment. But so often you've got other players coming up behind you, and you just can't afford to take a chance with something like that, especially when you're likely to go 0 on stamina. So I'd be, if anyone has any thoughts and cares to leave them in the comments, I'd really like to hear about ideas for setups for somebody who primarily plays as a Spear of the Church. And primarily what I'm wondering, there's a lot of trade-offs that I need to think through or get some help with. For example, a lot of chimes. I could equip something like Bountiful Light, but like the Filianor chime has something similar built in. What's the trade-off there? How much attunement do I want? How many spell slots do I want? A lot of times I'd think, well, I just want medium heal, but it's a little time consuming to cast, and so having some sort of regen spell, those typically get casted a bit faster, so it'd be nice to have one of those too. And then thinking about the trade-off between faith and then say strength and dexterity. Obviously the more faith I have, the more health I'll regen, but then the less powerful will be my attacks, unless I can get a weapon that's got good faith scaling. And then I have to decide if I want to go with Blessed or if I want to go with some sort of lightning infusion. Anyway, I don't have a lot of experience with faith builds, so if anyone has strong opinions on it, please do let me know. Thanks. There's a prime example of somebody just running right through the spears. It's crazy to me. The other funny thing that I've noticed is you'll sometimes get players that kind of stand up next to your spawn location as if they don't realize that you get spawn protection in the form of the spears that come up around you. I see a lot of people take a lot of damage because of that. Now, the better players will be smart and they'll like chuck fire bombs at you or they'll hit you with spells. So you got to be careful when you spawn, and you can't assume that those spears are going to protect you completely. You've got to kind of look around and see what's going on and make sure that you're not going to have to deal with casters. So I see him switch to one-handed mode, and I know exactly what's coming. Unfortunately, I'm able to punish it. I notice he's using a washing pole, and I don't see washing poles that much anymore. And I happened to be checking one of my builds out the other day, and all my builds, I think I've got a plus 10 washing pole just because it was like the one weapon that in duels, if I saw another player take out, I would take it out in opposition, just because that was such a difficult weapon for me to counter, especially somebody that doesn't really use shields. I do more now, but at the time I didn't really at all. But that weapon seems to have been nerfed in some fashion. Like, the damage is way lower than what I remember, but I wasn't able to find any discussion about it online, so I don't know if maybe I'm misremembering the weapon. I'm remembering it having more power than it did. So if anyone has any idea what happened to the washing pole, I would love to hear about that. So there was an interesting Reddit thread the other day about the nature of spear invasions and builds, and one of the points that I made in the comments is it's difficult to set up a good spear build because the setups that you will use as a spear that you would want to use can sometimes vary substantially from the types of builds that you would want to use in your other kinds of walks of life, whether it's PvE or other invasions. because it's a covenant, just a passive covenant you equip. It's not an active invasion. You just have to wait around to get summoned. And so, assuming you're like most people, you don't want to just stand around and wait. You're going to go do something else. You're going to go do some PvE. You're going to go maybe do some co-op, whatever. Obviously, you can't get invaded or get summoned when you're doing co-op in there. I broke his guard, and I really wish I would have known that was going to happen. But anyway, you end up having to compromise because your build ends up having to be something that's suitable for whatever else you're doing and be suitable for being a Spear of the Church. So, for example, I've got a Pyro character that's also in the Spears of the Church, and obviously he has Pyros equipped. However, if I knew I was going to be summoned as a Spear of the Church, I would not equip Pyros. I would equip Healing Miracles because he's like 30-30 with Faith in Him. So most of the Healing Miracles I can cast, and those are way more valuable as a Spear of the Church. So it got me thinking, because it's probably a good thing actually that it's that way, because I thought about it and I realized if invading were something that you could do actually from like an active perspective, like a red eye orb, people could come up with insanely customized builds highly tailored for a Spear of the Church invasion. And I started thinking for a few minutes about what a build like that might look like. And there's a great example of using those divine spears to trap somebody and punish them. But I started thinking about what that would look like, and my idea was you'd have a fair bit of vigor, pretty high vigor, you'd have a fair bit of attunement, and then tons of faith, and basically nothing else. And then you would be able to just go around and cast Healing Miracle after Healing Miracle. Now, you are confined to only 3 Ashen Estus. They won't give you any more than that. But if you had like a Sunlight Straight Sword and all that Ashen Estus and enough FP to be able to cast Healing Miracle after Healing Miracle, you would be a force to be reckoned with. Now, a build like that overall probably would not be a good one, but it would be good for being in a Spear of the Church. And here I see that the host is trying to be fancy with his katana parries, and there I almost got caught off by one, so now I'm kind of watching for it. Another thing that I've noticed in these invasions is there's so much happening so fast. You don't have time to think about it as it's happening. You can only react. So it's really important to have game plans that you come up with outside of these invasions, because you won't be able to think of things as they're happening. For example, I sometimes switch out my Lothric Knight Straight Sword in favor of a mace, especially if I know I'm going to go up against somebody that's using the Ring Knight Greatsword. It has a fantastic counter to that. Now, I won't do that if there's a bunch of players around, because I don't care how much poise you get with Perseverance and you get from this Covenant. If you stand in place and start trying to trade for very long, you are going to get crushed. But the switching to the mace is not something that I would be able to think of as I'm doing it, unless I had already given thought to it previously. I'm notorious for getting tunnel vision in these invasions. In fact, when I was younger, I used to get teased a bit about it, and people used to call me the unitasker, because I was so good at focusing on one task. But I was so good at it that sometimes I would lose track of the things that were happening around me. So I do definitely get tunnel vision when I'm doing these invasions. And so I have to take some time away and stop and think about what I'm doing and whether the strategies are really optimal or not. That's one thing actually I've really been impressed by a lot of guys, but Saint Ride is one. I know I pretty much talk about him in every other video. There's a reason for that. He's really, really good. And one thing that he does super well is he adjusts to changing circumstances. His strategies change, his tools change, his rings, whatever it is that he's using, he's constantly adapting to the situations as they evolve around him. And I wish I were half as good as he is at doing that. So here you see me doing the pressure to the one player who's low on health. And those orbs, man, I think I mentioned this in my previous video. But I just am in awe of what From was able to do with this covenant. They did so many subtle little things that made this such a fun covenant to be a part of. Those orbs are constantly doing work for you. Countless times I've been surrounded by phantoms and who are getting ready to stun lock me, and those orbs shoot out and interrupt them no matter what they're doing. It is a real lifesaver. And then you saw just a moment ago, it's very useful when you're chasing somebody down, because even if they're going to roll your attacks on reaction, they can't react to those orbs in time. So they either have to panic roll away from the orbs, or they have to get lucky and guess when they're going to shoot out. Alternatively, what can happen sometimes is if you're getting ready to go for a running attack, those orbs can shoot out immediately before, and they can momentarily stun lock your opponent and hold them there in place for your running attack. Now, the stun lock that it gives is not very much. It's just for a moment, but if the timing's right, you can leverage that in to do more damage. It's not really anything that you can plan on or kind of coordinate around. It's just kind of one of those happy accidents that happens from time to time. And here this gold bro is not doing a good job of paying attention to what's going on. He's screwing around with the Guardian when what he should be doing is coming over here to give some backup to the host. He really just let me pressure the crap out of that host, and the host is frankly pretty lucky that some of my running attacks didn't grab him. So whenever there's just one player left and they've got the Ring Knight Greatswords, then I bring out the axe. And for whatever reason here, I equip it, but I haven't switched to it, and I'm not really sure why that is. Oh, here I go. Okay. Oh, nope, I didn't switch to it. And that backstab didn't seem to do as much damage as I would have thought that it should have. That makes me wonder if he's wearing that ring that causes you to take less damage from backstabs. You know, that's one of those rings that I would think probably almost never makes sense. But if you like to use the Ring Knight Greatswords and you love to spam L1, that might actually be a good use for it. Yeah, a better alternative would probably be to get better with the weapon or to use something else. That's interesting. I didn't notice that originally when it happened. Well, I don't even know what damage reduction you get from that ring. Like, nobody ever uses it. Unfortunately, those Ring Knight Greatswords are omnipresent in these invasions. And I know if you watch my videos, you almost certainly are already watching Saint. But he has frequently mentioned how this weapon is not such a problem one-on-one, but in groups it can be a huge challenge to deal with. It just has the capacity to dish out massive amounts of damage, and the stun lock that it generates is so lengthy. The other phantoms can get in on the action, and I've had Spear of the Church invasions with 4 players where your defenses are so high and each player individually isn't doing that much damage, but in a matter of about 5 seconds, watch my health go from full down to about 20%. All because of that weapon. This is terrifying. And there you could see me hanging around a little bit longer than I normally would have, because I saw that phantom was close to death. And anytime you get an opportunity like that with a large group, it's usually worth taking a few risks to try and get them out of the game. My gameplay here has really changed and evolved with how I use the Guardians. when the first guardian spawns in, obviously you're not yet in the arena. So by the time you show up, that first guardian is usually pretty much a goner. I don't usually expend much effort trying to protect them. But that second guardian, and I'm embarrassed to say, I don't remember how many heals they can get off. It's either 2 or 3, I think. It's not unlimited. But it's really important to protect them for those heals, and maybe even more importantly, because they divide attention. And I found that through use of the Divine Spear Fragment, I can do a really good job of splitting everybody's attention, and it gives me a really big advantage. So make sure you keep that second guardian alive for as long as you can if you're a spear user. And there you see that mace is so bad at roll catching when people roll to the left or right. So here I'd like to get a cast off of Blessed Weapons so I can start getting the regen. But these guys are keeping me under enough pressure that I really can't. And one interesting thing about those ring greatswords, that first L1 in the moveset, the one he's doing right there, where he kind of does the wheelbarrow. If you watch those swords very carefully, I didn't realize at first, but at the end of the sort of wheelbarrow, the swords get extended quite a bit further than you would actually think from looking at it. It probably extends out an additional like half the length of the sword. Half the length of the sword more than it would appear from just looking at the weapon. I found personally that rolling towards the player while they use that L1 is the safest thing to do unless you're pretty far away. So here I'm in pretty bad shape. I've got 2 players with big weapons. I can't take many more attacks. Right about now, I'm really wishing I had medium heal equipped. Here I noticed that the host is not healing, and he's low on health, which makes me think that maybe he's out of Estus. But I'm in a precarious spot because I can't take even another hit at this point. And there the golden orbs do work. Love those things. So one other thing I should probably talk about, it's not really a big deal, but it's just something that's been on my mind a bit lately, and that is rude gestures. I typically didn't like to use gestures like point down, but I did on occasion if I felt like that the host had done something especially egregious. But after seeing some comments from other folks and thinking about it more, I've decided to abandon them. I mean, I won't say I'll never ever do it again, but at least for the time being, I'm going to keep those out. In fact, I was really tested actually earlier today because I had a guy invade me, and he was really laggy. Whether he outplayed me or not is sort of questionable. He gave me a point down, so I fired up the dried finger. Sure enough, he re-invades me, and I just absolutely creamed him. And I resisted the urge to do a point down. I did a point up instead, which made me feel pretty good. So trying to keep a little bit of the salt out of the game. And you know, it's funny, they say things like fake it till you make it. If you don't feel a certain way, act that way, and you will feel that way. And I will tell you that just by omitting the point downs, I feel a lot better. And there I took a chance. I thought I was gonna get the backstab on the Fugs user, and I knew I was gonna eat that pyro if I didn't, but I thought I would get into iframes for the backstab, but I whiffed the backstab, and so I took a bunch of damage. And the situation here is kind of interesting. The guy casting the pyros, I think, is the host. And he's kind of just staying out of the fray, and he's got, I think, that curse word Great Shield, which has tons of stability, so he's just kind of hanging back, kind of trying to protect himself. So I'm constantly having to avoid these pyros here. in my experience in the spear invasions is one caster is usually pretty manageable. You can use the pillars in the arena to great effect. Again, I really commend From for doing a good job with the design here. But when you get in a situation where you've got multiple casters, that starts to get really, really dangerous because they can kind of triangulate on you. I guess it's not triangulating when it's only two people, but you understand what I mean. They can get an angle on you. With one caster, it's pretty easy to get in a place where they can't get an angle on you and kind of move around. Here you see I'm using the Claymore. I'm just trying to mix things up a little bit, trying to see what works best and what doesn't. There I'm able to use my poise to my advantage and just kind of ignore his swings. And here I see the other Phantom hanging out over by the host. I can't really figure out why he's over there and not trying to kick my ass. And then I see he has like no health left. So I would say I probably spend 20%, maybe even more of my time as a Spear of the Church, just chasing people, like trying to just stay on their nuts, keep them from healing or whatever they're going to do. And I'm really amazed at how often people don't do the kind of the basic things that they should. And so here it's just finally me and the host, and I know I'm probably going to beat him here. That was probably a little premature celebration. But, you know, when you're rolling away from somebody that's pressuring you like that, rolling attacks are your friend. And there I'm able to pin him between the spear wall and me. That was awesome. So they've got a Pestilent Mercury waiting for me. That's actually a pretty common strategy when there's casters. Whenever there's a caster, I would say there's Pestilent Mercury waiting for me in at least half of the cases. Oh man, look at that damage. With that Pestilent Mercury, I'm not sure if that's an effective strategy normally, because I don't know that I've really taken much damage from it, but I suppose if somebody were not really paying attention and they tried to stay back there thinking they were safe and maybe cast some buffs or something, they might end up taking a lot of damage from that. Barely rolled out of the way of that magic. Now, if I were more confident and I had more health, when the player does the L1 combo, as long as you roll out of the first couple, you can kind of just walk around and backstab them. But here I don't have the confidence that I can do that. But instead I engage in one of the all-time great roll catch combos. 5 in a row. I've never done that before. Well, hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the videos today. Thanks and take care.